More than 4,000 years ago, the dawn of civilization began to shine over the land of China. The first country came into being among the primitive tribes of the Yellow River Valley. Over 500 years later, Xia was replaced by Shang state. In the 11th century BC, the Zhou state conquered the country by force. As only one of the princes could succeed to the throne, the rest were given to feuding. Generation after generation, dozens of states within a state emerged. Wars broke out and continued on and off for over 500 years. It was not until 230 BC that an army from the northwest began to sweep away all these warring states. It annexed all the states and conquered all the tribes within a period of just 10 years. It was this army that finally put an end to the wars. A unified state, the Qin Empire, was founded for the first time in China. This was an army which created history. Nevertheless, people have had little understanding of it. Its image has been blurred and indistinct. What was the source of this strong Qin army? How did it accomplish this gigantic task? Looking back upon the pace of the unification of the Qin army, we find it had a long and tortuous history. More than 3,000 years ago, the Zhou state ruled over China from its capital, Hao. On its northwest border lived a tribe who raised horses exclusively for the monarch. These were the earliest Qin. Where this legendary tribe originally came from, and when it moved to the northwest highlands, is still a mystery. In 771 BC, a nomadic tribe from the west captured the capital, Hao, and the Zhou state was forced to move its capital. As the king of Zhou travelled eastward, the Qins, horse raisers, escorted him with warriors. In order to express his gratitude for the Qins' loyalty, the Zhou king conferred on the leader of the Qins the rank of feudal prince. In this way, the Qins set up their own state. But shortly after the founding of their state, the Qins faced an extremely difficult situation. At that time, the northwest highlands were under the rule of a nomadic tribe. This tribe rode on horseback and were extremely violent. They regularly attacked and killed the Qins. According to the historical records, several generations of the former kings of Qin were all killed on the battlefield. Thus the Qin and their army shed their blood like water at the very beginning of the founding of the state. Nevertheless, this staunch army matured and hardened in adverse circumstances. After more than 200 years of bloody battles, the Qin army completely conquered this wild but brave nomadic people and thus unified the northwest highlands. Having got a firm foothold in the west, the Qins turned their attention to the east. At that time, the king of Zhou had lost his dominant position. The flames of war were raging on the central plains. These were times of no quarter asked or given, the survival of the fittest. After hundreds of years of wars of annexation, the weaker states were eliminated one after another. Finally, the Qins faced just 6 strong opponents. The Qins found these opponents to be far stronger than the nomadic tribes of the grasslands. They realized their dream of eastward expansion could not be realized in a short period of time. The turning point came in 356 BC. In that year, a person called Shang Yang began to carry out reformations of the Qin Empire. After these political reforms, the Qin army marched eastwards. The Wei state was the first overlord in the Warring States period. According to the historical records, the Wei army was noted for its full armour and its valour. Nevertheless, the valiant Wei army turned out to be the first victim of the Qin. In 293 BC, the Qin army killed 240,000 Wei soldiers, after which the Wei state went into decline. The Chu state was a powerful state in the south. The bronze swords made by the Chu had had a great reputation up till this time. In 278 BC, the Qin army occupied Ying, which had been the capital of the Chu for several hundred years. Chu would never rise again. The Zhao state was in the north. Its people were famous for their bravery and their fighting skills, and they had long harassed the nomadic nationalities in the region. But in 260 BC, the Qin army annihilated 450,000 picked men of the Zhao army at Changping. The Zhao state was greatly undermined. Since the political reforms of Shang Yang, the strong Qin army had sapped the military strength of the big powers in the east through war. The Qin army had annihilated more than 1,600,000 men from the 6 states. By 230 BC, there was no challenge to the Qin army, so the Qin Emperor Yingzheng launched a large-scale war against the other states. During 10 years of this war, the casualties of the armies of the 6 states amounted to more than 2 million, an astonishing number. In 221 BC, the Qi state surrendered without a fight. The Qin army pressed onwards to take Linzi, at that time the biggest city in the world. That put an end to the Warring States period, and the Qin Empire came into being. From the rising in the northwest highlands until the unification of China, this great army had experienced more than 550 years of war. Xianyang Palace, once the heart of the Qin Empire, is near the city of Xianyang in Shanxi province today. It was right here in Xianyang that Emperor Yingzheng issued orders and commanded his army to unify the country. 2,000 years has passed, and Xianyang Palace is now little more than a heap of earth. No signs of the Qin army can be found. So what kind of army was this? The great historian Sima Qian was born 100 years after the Qin Empire. His renowned classical works, the historical records, record the wars waged one after another by the Qin army during those hundreds of years. But Sima Qian mentions little of the mechanisms and details of these wars. Only a few dozen words, sometimes much less, are written about a war of several months' duration involving hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Sima Qian paid no attention to the weapons, equipment, or tactics used by the Qin army. In 260 BC, the Qin army engaged in a decisive battle at Changping against the Zhao state, Qin's strongest opponent. The battle lasted 2 whole years. Sima Qian records that an ingenious detachment of 25,000 men of the Qin army set out to cut the Zhao army into 2 parts at a point when both sides were at a stalemate. But again, Sima Qian doesn't go into detail as to how this detachment won the battle with a surprise attack. Once the Zhao army was divided, the Qin army dispatched 5,000 cavalrymen to cut off the Zhao supply line. So what kind of troops were the Qin cavalry? The Qin army then immediately dispatched light troops to attack the Zhao army. These light troops must have had extraordinary attacking ability. So what exactly is the meaning of the word light? Gaoping County in Shanxi Province was the site of the battle between the Qin and the Zhao at that time. With the passage of time, a village has emerged on that ancient battlefield. The head of the county museum regularly comes to the village to collect cultural relics, as the villagers often come across ancient weapons such as arrowheads. These arrowheads are deeply buried in the earth and, it seems, sometimes even smell of blood. The Changping battle between the Qin and the Zhao was the crucial confrontation in the course of the unification of China by the Qin army. Hence, studying this military operation could be a good way to understand the Qin army. According to Sima Qian's records, a Qin army of about 600,000 took part in the battle right in this valley. Changping was nearly 500 kilometers from Xianyang, the capital of the Qin Empire. This means that more than 2,000 years ago, an army of 600,000 men, far from their own land, was engaged in a war for 2 years. Today's military experts are puzzled by this problem. Under the conditions existing then, it should have been absolutely impossible for the Qin army to fulfill such a task. In the winter of 1948, the Huaihai campaign broke out. This was the biggest campaign during the War of Liberation. Over the wide field of operations, the Liberation Army was closely followed by numerous peasant transport teams. They uninterruptedly transported grain and munitions to the front using their own carts and oxen. In the course of the whole operation, the Liberation Army had 600,000 soldiers on the battlefield, the same number as made up the Qin army in the Changping operation. But there were 5,430,000 peasants supplying 600,000 soldiers of the Liberation Army. On average, it took 9 peasants to supply 1 soldier. More than 2,000 years ago, the total population of the Qin Empire was no more than 5 million. How then was it possible for the Qin army to ensure supplies to those 600,000 men? How could the Qin Empire supply provisions to an army of 500,000 or 600,000 men to support wars which lasted for years on end, and at the beginning of the times of iron-made farm tools and draft animals? The consumption of military provisions would have been astonishing for this enormous army. How was the national strength of the Qin Empire able to support this huge drain? To these questions, Sima Qian doesn't give an answer in his historical records. However, he does record the more grisly details of the Qin army. The Zhao army was defeated and surrendered at Changping. After the surrender, 400,000 Zhao prisoners of war were buried alive. Only 240 very young men were released. 450,000 Zhao men were killed during the whole Changping operation. In the valley at Gaoping County in Shanxi Province, archaeologists have made grim discoveries. Within a circumference of about 10 kilometres, big pits of buried skeletons can be found everywhere. More than 100 corpses of Zhao soldiers can be found in just one pit. According to Sima Qian's writings, the Qin army was the embodiment of cruelty. At that time, an advisor wrote a description of the Qin army on the battlefield in another historical document, Essay on the Warring States. They carried prisoners of war in their arms and wore prisoners' heads hanging from their belts as they pursued and attacked their enemies. The Qin army was described as savage in the historical records. Could it be said it was cruelty and brutality that nurtured these valiant warriors? The Qin army, once the strongest of armies, is a source of so many perplexing riddles. They existed only in people's imagination for thousands of years, until the day when some peasants in Shanxi province made an unexpected discovery that sent shockwaves around the world. In 1974, Xiyang village in Lintong County, Shanxi province, was hit by drought. The villagers hoped that underground water could save their dying crops. Some villagers selected a place to dig a well in a wood of pomegranate trees. One evening in March, still not having struck water, they excavated a life-size terracotta head buried 5 or 6 meters underground. News of the discovery spread rapidly. Archaeologists arrived and took over from the local farmers, beginning a professional excavation of the site.
我们来的时候，领导曾经跟我们说了，是吧？你们到那去挖去，挖了个大概挖1个礼拜到10天左右就把它挖完了。
A huge pit was dug at the small mouth of the well, but the lifelike terracotta statues kept appearing in the layers of soil. Yuan Zhongyi, an archaeologist on the spot at the time, and his colleagues asserted that it was an ancient secondary burial pit. But nobody foresaw that their excavation over dozens of days covered only a very small part of the pit, like the tip of an iceberg.
坑的有边儿嘛，有时候我们要嘛就寻它的边儿，我们要这个寻它的边儿，再挖，就是到处啊找不到它的边儿，就是。当时我们就当时也很奇怪的，就是还没有边儿的东西嘛，就是。
The final result of the excavation showed it to be a huge pit of unprecedented size, its area far beyond any expectation. That day in 1974 was the prologue to the most stunning archaeological discovery of the 20th century.
这是一个大型的兵马俑坑了，就是啊，面积达到14000多平方米的，就是像这样大的陪葬坑啊。 在中国过去从来没有发现过，在世界上也没有发现过那么大的陪葬坑的。
The statues of the warrior in the pit were originally in an upright posture. Obviously, they'd been badly damaged. In 1974, the statues in front of the archaeologist had all collapsed. Broken heads and arms could be found everywhere in the huge pit. So many terracotta figures had never been discovered in the history of archaeology.
根据它已经出土这个密度推算，我们1号兵马俑坑里头啊，当时我们大体做一个估计了，大约有陶俑陶马有6000件了，就是浩浩荡荡。
Elaborate reparation work began on the broken terracotta warriors. They started to resume their original aspects. One after another, the pottery figures began to stand up once again. They were the same size as real human beings and were all dressed in warriors' costume with armour and robes. They were arranged in perfect order and stood solemnly along the partition walls like a true army. There in the pit stood several hundred war horses neighing with heads held up high as if on the battlefield. The traces of ancient chariots could clearly be seen beside these war horses. The wooden chariots had completely rotted away, but rough outlines could still be identified. Dozens of chariots, several hundred war horses and thousands of soldiers were lining up in front of the archaeologists as if it were a complete underground army group. No records about the existing terracotta warriors can be found in any of the historical records, nor has any legend ever revealed a clue as to their identity. Whose army was it? Who was the master of this secondary burial pit? Guangzhong Plain was the political centre of the Qin, Han and Tang dynasties. To the west of the pit, a huge mound can be seen on the horizon. This is the tomb of the first Qin emperor, known as Emperor Shi of the Qin, the founder of the Qin Empire.
这周围呢，再没有其他的墓葬啊。距秦始皇陵啊，大概是1.5公里了。虽然比较远，但周围呢又没有其他的墓葬，我们就初步判断它是秦始皇陵的一个陪葬坑。
It would appear that such a magnificent secondary burial pit could only be the handiwork of this impressive Qin emperor, but for the archaeologists, the deduction had to be proved by direct evidence. The excavation went on. The archaeologists found large amounts of bronze weapons in the clay. After careful cleaning, some characters appeared on the surfaces of the weapons. The characters on this spear are similar to modern Chinese characters. It reads Shigong. According to the historical records, it was the Qin emperor who set up Shigong. This was a state office in charge of the production of weapons. On this spear, the experts have found more conclusive evidence. The characters on the right side of the spear read, supervised by Xianbang, the 5th year, Liu Buwei. Liu Buwei was the prime minister of the Qin emperor. One of his duties was responsibility for weapons production.
兵器上面有文字的，有秦始皇的几年的，比如秦始皇4年、5年7年，是吧？还有这个8年的，5年、7年、8年，另外16年、17年、18年、19年，都有秦始皇的几年的，这是吧？
The years on the weapons showed their exact date of manufacture. It goes without saying these weapons were all made in the time of the Qin emperor, and they were buried underground as funeral objects after his death. In front of Yuan Zhongyi and his colleagues, an invincible army, lost for more than 2,000 years and covered by the fog of history, had unexpectedly reappeared. The indistinct picture of the Qin army painted by Sima Qian instantly became concrete and clear. The earth-shaking effect of the Terracotta warriors' discovery was beyond description. In 1975, the attention of the whole world was riveted on the Terracotta warriors. News of the discovery was carried on front pages everywhere. Heads of state and government and important people from all fields came to Shanxi province, one after another, to see the ancient Chinese troops with their own eyes. Without exception, they were awed. The Qin Terracotta warriors appeared on the front cover of National Geographic. The title, The First Emperor's Army, China's Incredible Find. But with regard to knowledge about the Qin army, what caused the greatest impression amongst the Americans was its cruelty and brutality. However, the truth must be revealed piece by piece by the real scholars through a scientific approach. The discovery of the Terracotta warriors has entirely changed Yuan Zhongyi's life. His pleasant surprise and excitement were soon over. From the beginning of his research work, he was aware of the fact that these living statues would present quite a number of puzzles. Each of these warriors had a different physical appearance, and their dress was obviously different. Some wore small caps, and some had their hair worn in a coil. What was the implication of these differences? It seems those with caps were officers. But what were their ranks? Could it be said that the Qin army had its own strict system of military ranks? 6,000 warriors were all in good order in the pit. But was the arrangement arbitrary, or did it have some implication? Could these pottery figures reveal any methods of military operation and array in ancient China? There were no answers to a series of questions. After the discovery of the first pit of terracotta warriors, archaeologists discovered another huge pit still covered by thick loess earth. Researchers have made a vertical image of the pit with thousands of photos. A magnificent underground view can be seen by computer analogue. In the northeast corner of the pit were crossbowmen. The crossbow was the most precise weapon on the ancient battlefield. The commander-in-chief of the Zhao army was killed by Qin crossbowmen at the Battle of Changping. Could that tell something about the power of Qin crossbowmen? In the south of the pit was an independent chariot unit. This was a completely unknown branch of the army. Was it possible that this chariot unit could be the mysterious light army of the Qin, which played such a key part in the Changping battle? The chariots were closely followed by cavalry. 4 cavalrymen fall into one well-ordered group. Was it possible that these were the Qin cavalry who cut off the supply line of the Zhao army? The postures of these warriors indicated that they had their own weapons tightly held in their hands. As time went on, the wooden parts of these weapons rotted, but the metal part had survived well up until now. A total of more than 40,000 pieces of weapons were unearthed in the pit of terracotta warriors. But these weapons were basically made of bronze, and this has greatly puzzled archaeologists.
这里头有一个问题呢，就是在战国晚期的时候，根据书上记载，根据其他的一些地方的考古资料来看呢，当时铁兵器已经出来了，那秦朝为什么这个地方都发现的都是铜兵器呢？青铜兵器呢？于是有些先生就提出了一些观点呢，就是说这是落后的兵器。
According to accepted wisdom, the wounding power of iron-made weapons is far stronger than that of bronze ones. How was it possible that the Qin army, equipped with these outdated bronze weapons, could be invincible? It is rarely in human history that a more primitive civilization is able to prevail over a more advanced one. The Qin army once created history. Could it be that this poorly equipped army could have unified China merely by its cruelty and brutality? The full truth will be further revealed along with the discovery of the terracotta warriors.